And this session will be recorded and provided to you with the materials after the meeting. Also, if you all have questions throughout the duration of the presentation, please place those questions in the chat and we will pause periodically to address those questions. And we'll get started whenever you're ready, Sarah. Take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aisha. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Anguiano, and I'm a grant specialist on the R3 team. Unfortunately, Maureen is not able to lead the training today, so I will be doing my best to step in for her. All right, started. Okay, so as usual, we ask that you remain muted throughout the training. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box at the bottom right side at any time. We will be monitoring the chat box to make sure no question goes unanswered. Again, this is just so we could get a clean recording, which we'll email you the link for and PowerPoint shortly after the training. To see the full screen, click on Layout at the upper right side of the screen, then click Full Screen. You will receive a follow-up email from cija.r3training@illinois.gov, so please keep a lookout for it. And if you need to add a staff member to these trainings, please send us an email with the following information of the staff member's name, their role, and their email address, and we'll add them to our email list. All right, so last week, Maureen explained the 3 different disbursal methods, and that were the standard reimbursement, advance pay, and working capital advance. So today we will be introducing the PFR. We will be entering the cash budget, entering grant expenses, and going over ICEJA PFR review and dispersal. So let's look at the periodic financial report, which we call the PFR. So we know that you have all become somewhat familiar with Amplifund system when you submitted your application. When Amplifund is fully operational for us, it will be a comprehensive grant management system through which you'll not only apply for your grant, but you'll also use to submit fiscal and financial reporting. We're not there yet, so the PFR we're about to show you will act as a bridge to the Amplifund fiscal reporting. So before we dive into details on how to navigate it, let's talk about how you obtain the PFR. When your agreement is fully executed, you'll receive an email from your grant specialist that will detail the PFR trainings and the PFR deadlines for submission. That email will include a link to a shared folder that the specialist has created for your grant. That email will also include instructions using the shared folder. When you first open the shared folder, you will see the PFR and the time reporting templates. Please note that we will be going into detail on how to submit your time reporting on Wednesday, October 16th. When you receive the email, you will open the folder and download the PFR file. You should first complete the cash budget, which Maureen discussed yesterday, then report your expenses for the first month or quarter if you've elected quarterly reimbursement. We'll also include instructions on how to use the shared folder in the follow-up email for today's session. Okay, so as you'll see in a few minutes, the PFR is an Excel document with a series of tabs. The macro enables these tabs to communicate, and the PFR does not operate in a browser version of Excel, so please be sure to download it and save it. You will need to enable the macros by clicking on this Enable Contents button on the yellow toolbar at the top of the page. So we've also built in some color coding to help navigate the PFR. The black buttons are for ICEJA use only. The big exception to this rule is the black Go Back button located here, which will be on every page. Grantees and grant specialists use this Go Back button to always get back to the home page. Green buttons are for grantee navigation, and the green arrow located here will take you directly to that section. And then we also have red text, and that indicates a pull-down menu. So after you save the PFR, it will always open to the same page you were on when you last closed it. Sometimes the PFR may accidentally be saved on a page you just don't recognize after ICEJA use, but that's okay. Just select that Go Back button and it'll take you back to the home page. All right, so let's get started with the cash budget. I know Maureen went over this yesterday, so I'm not going to go into full detail again, but I will show you where you can locate this on the PFR. As mentioned earlier, if you select the green arrow, it will take you to this grantee navigation section here, and you'll see all the green buttons for your use. There you'll find the input cash budget in step 1. When you click on it, it will take you directly to the cash budget tab. So the first thing I suggest you do is enter the month conversions, located at the top. And it will help you keep track of your dates. So for this cohort, month 1 will be November, month 2, December, and all the way to month 12, ending in October. Again, this is just a projection of your expenses, so you're not binded to this cash budget, but we do refer to it to make sure you're staying on track throughout the year. So before I continue, are there any questions, Aisha?
No questions at this time, Sarah.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. All right, moving on. All right, well, let's look at how you would report your grant expenses. So the default approved budget, which is located in column C right here, is the one that was approved when your grant was executed. This information will already be completed when you receive your PFR. That budget is only revised when ICESA approves a budget revision, and your grant specialist will make that adjustment in the PFR if you ever have a budget revision. You'll see you'll be reporting your current grant expenses in column G here, which is the first green column. And then column I, which is the second green column, is only used for prior month adjustments. And we'll demonstrate what this column is in a few minutes. But the important thing to remember is that after you submit your PFR and it's been approved, we're going to lock the PFR so the expenses that you report cannot be altered. If you find in later months that you made an error, either underreporting or overreporting an expense, you can make that correction in this column here. And then column K is the projected expenses for the next period, and that is only activated for advanced pay grantees. So the reimbursement amount requested is calculated in the PFR based on your dispersal method of your grant. And you'll see that on line 40, which we'll walk through when I show you the PFR itself. To submit your PFR, you will print, sign, and upload a signed PDF to the shared folder using the name conventions, which we'll discuss later. If you cannot print the PFR, you can save it and sign it with the certified electronic signature, which includes a timestamp as shown in this example here. And then you want to upload the signed PDF and the Excel file to the shared folder. So both of these are needed for approval. Then you'll email your R3 PFR specialist to let them know that you've uploaded it. If you are submitting for more than 1 month, you will need to upload a signed PDF for each of those individual months, and same goes for quarters. However, you only need to upload the Excel book once, as if it's done properly, it will show all prior month expenses. So we're going to show you the PFR in the next slide. But first, let's review a few common errors to watch out for, which could lead to your submission being rejected and payments delayed. So the first mistake is missing signatures of 2 different people, one preparing the report and a different person approving the report. So not only should there be 2 different people signing off, but we need 2 actual signatures, whether they be physically signed or the certification ones. We will not accept it if you just type in your name. The other common errors are pulling down the wrong month, not adding the month or year in the header of each report, being over budget, and using the tool with disabled macros. And I'm going to demonstrate those errors when what they look like when I have the PFR opened. Before we jump to that, just one more time, are there any questions?
One question. What if there are not 2 people in the program?
So there usually should be, you always want to have someone checking the work. It is usually a requirement that we have two different people on that. I would ask your grant specialist exactly for more detail if there is an exception, but we definitely want those two signatures. So that's something that we would have to discuss on the side. Is there any more?
Can you explain being over budget?
Yes, I'm actually going to show that in a little bit, but basically, when you create your budget, let's say that you only had $5,000 in supplies, and then you end up spending $6,000, $7,000 instead, that would be over budget. Again, I'm going to show you what that looks like in the PFR and how to keep track of it and what you should be doing instead. So I will kind of circle back to that one in a second.
Last question.
Mhm.
Are there thresholds for going over budget, like 10%, etc.?
We do have that exception. I believe we are going to be going into that a little bit more detail when we talk about budget revisions. That is kind of a case by case, and if you are ever going over this threshold, you should still be emailing your grant specialist because we need that prior notification to approve the overspending. If you don't email us this, then we will not be able to approve that.
All right, that's it.
Sounds good. All right. All right, so let's pull up the first of the three. Let me make sure I'm sharing this. Awesome. Okay. So now let's look at the PFR itself, and we're going to start with reimbursement method. So you see that when the PFR opens to the homepage, it has been set up for your disbursal method here. You can also see a lot of black buttons, which, as you know, are for ICEJA use only. And if you use the arrow or scroll down, you will find the grantee navigation section. So let's open month one by using this pull down menu. So again, you're going to see all the months here, and I'm looking for month one. I'm going to select that and then select go to PFR. So the top white boxes will auto-populate from information your monitor has entered prior to you receiving the PFR. In this case, month one, you also need to include this information here. And this is one of the errors that are common. So you always want to include the correct month that we're on. In this case, we know month one is November. So I'm going to select November. I'm going to type in 2024, the year. And then you also want to type in the date prepared up here at the top. Unlike other ICEJA fiscal reporting tools we used in the past, the PFR does ask for FTE, which is this first line item here. So in this case, we're not really looking for full-time equivalents. For example, 2 half-time staff members equals 1 full-time. What we're actually looking for is how many staff you have on the program. So if you have 2 half-time staff members, that reflects as 2 FTEs on the PFR. So hypothetically, I would be filling this PFR out in early December, as the month one is due December 15th. So that means I would have all my November receipts and invoices on hand. In this case, I'm stating that I had 3 staff members working for that month. 3 staff members working, and then I had 9,500 for personnel. I had some fringe payments, nearly $50 in travel, supplies, occupancy, and telecommunications. If you don't have an expense for that month, so in this case, I don't have any expense for contractual, you can just leave it as is. Because if you see that if I were to try to type in 0 and I press enter, it just kind of reverts. So you could just leave it. And then when you look down here, let's see. You see after you type in all your expenses, you see your total expenses here on line 38. And then you also see your dispersal amount requested in line 40. And you'll see that these two match. After you enter your expenses, you should then complete the 2 different signatures and the requested information here. If you do not have any expenses for a month, you still need to submit a signed PDF and the Excel book to us for filing. All right, so let's look at the big black box right in the middle of this page. This box is covering the columns that reflect prior month expenses. Since this is month 1, there are no prior months yet, but I'll show you what these columns look like when we move on to month 2. And then here we have column K, which, as mentioned before, this is only for advanced pay grantees. So since I'm a reimbursement grantee, if I were to try to write anything here, you see that I get an error. Okay. So one thing I want to note is, which kind of goes back to that question, is that this PFR is a great tool to help you keep track of your funds. In column E right here, you'll see that the expended percentages of each category. So I highly suggest keeping an eye on this column. If you find yourself nearing 100% for any of these categories, please have a conversation with your grant monitor, as a budget vision may be required to reallocate your funds. If you do go over budget, ICESA may not pay the difference, so it is important to always keep track of your expenses and approved budget amounts. So now I'm going to use the Go Back button so we can look at month 2. Again, you're going to use the pull down, select month 2, and press Go to PFR. Again, you always want to make sure you enter the correct month. In this case, month 2 is December. Again, I'm going to type in 2024 and then type in the date prepared. Oh, sorry. Okay. And so after you do that, you're going to list your current expenses in the column G. Yeah, column G. And you'll see that your total expenditures still match your dispersal amount. The difference here is that the black box is now gone, meaning we can see the prior month adjustment columns. So the important thing about this one is that, let's say you had a typo when you reported rent from the previous month or previous months, no matter like how far back, this is the month that you need to correct. So let's say that you, instead of typing in $2,000 for rent, you typed in 2,200. So in order to fix that, I would type in a negative 200, press enter, and you see now that your dispersal amount has decreased by the $200. So it's taken it out of this month. And then let's say you also forgot to include a $500 tablet or something. So that would be in supplies. I'm going to put a positive 500 in this case. Press enter. So then you'll see that instead of it saying negative 200, again, it does the math for us. It's going to state now a positive 300. And then now our dispersal has increased by that $300. So if you need to make these adjustments for prior months, please let your monitor know what these edits are for. When you send your email that you've uploaded your PFR to the shared folder, please also state what the specific line item in the budget adjustment is for and what month. So in this example, in my email, I would tell my monitor that I had an overcharge of $200 for rent for the month of November, or I forgot to include a $500 tablet that I paid for back in November. And one more important thing that I want to stress is, if you are submitting several months together, for example, month 2 and month 3, right now we're in month 2, you have to make sure you go back to that home page and use the drop down menu on the home page instead of here. So what you should not do is just change this to the next month, which would be January. Change that to January, and then erase all of this information and enter your January instead. If you submit it this way, your grant specialist will reject it, as it's important that we see all prior month expenses. So by doing this, you are throwing off your totals, and the PFR will be reporting less than what you've actually been spending. The proper way to do it is to always go back to this home page and select that next month. And then here you would select the January. So you always want to make sure that this month matches the month that you are reporting for. Let's stop here before we bring up the advance pay. Aisha, are there any questions?
No questions at this time, Sarah. You're doing great.
Thank you. All right, moving on. So let's look at advance pay now. Same thing, you're going to notice at the top that this is now listed for advance pay. And then exact same thing, we're going to go down to month 1 and select go to PFR. You see that I've already entered my month. Oops, I'm a little bit bigger for you. All right, so you see that I've already entered my month and my year, and then I should be reporting what date I am submitting this. Okay. Again, I will be entering my current expenses and yes, current expenses here. The biggest difference in this case is that now column K is active so that I can list my projected expenses for the upcoming month. So you'll see that I've already filled this in, and the PFR has calculated the disbursal, which is those total of the projected expenses less any cash balance. But I know that sounds weird. We'll kind of show some live examples here. So here it shows that your true expense for your current amount is $33,567, and your anticipated expense is $26,084. The PFR does a calculation and determines that you should get a disbursal of $25,767 to cover your upcoming month. So you may be wondering, how is there a cash balance if this is just the first month? Well, there's a tab on the CJA side of the PFR that your grant specialist will use to authorize the advance of your expected cash needs for month 1. So the PFR calculates the cash balance as the total numbers that have been disbursed minus your expenses. So in this example, you would have received an advance for $33,804, and I'm going to show you where that number came from. And if you remember the cash budget, that just came from your first month of your cash budget here. So that was the advance we would have given you before this all started. So we realize that these projections will not always be perfect. Sometimes the actual expenses will be more than the projections and sometimes less. The advance pay takes this into account when calculating the disbursal. So it will add in any dollars we owe you if the projection was lower than the actual, and it will subtract any cash you have on hand if your projections are higher than the actual expenses. That's because we are only allowed to advance you the amount that we expect that you will need to operate the program for the next month. So let's look at month 2 with a little bit more examples here. Again, we're going to scroll down to month 2 and select go to PFR. Month 2, as we know, is December. Type in the year and the date prepared. Again, entering your December actual expenses and including your anticipated January expenses here. So, and you also see that I can now put any prior month adjustments should I need. So in this example, let's see here. Okay, so let's say that you spent more than you projected for the month of December, right? In the previous example, you projected $26,000, which led you to being vouchered that $25,000 cash balance. However, let's say you actually spent $30,000, which is about $4,000 to $5,000 more than you anticipated. So again, we would take your column K projections, which in this case is now $20,000, and minus that negative $4,000 to $5,000. So basically $4,000 to $5,000 that we owe you now, and that gives you a total of $25,000. Now, so let's say the opposite is true. Let's say you have more cash balance than you used and will need to cover the next month. Then you'll notice that this line 40 is going to be blacked out. And that's because the PFR is showing that not only do you have more than enough cash on hand to cover your current expenses, but to also cover your upcoming projections as well. So in this case, we would approve your PFR, but you would not receive a check for that month. I know this one's a little bit more confusing, but again, the PFR kind of does all that math for us, which is nice. Let me stop here before we jump on to the next one, which is going to be working capital. Aisha, are there any questions on this one?
No questions.
Okay. All right. And the last one here is going to be working capital advance. So for this one, I'm going to start with the cash budget. Again, you could scroll down or just select this arrow and select input cash budget. So as we showed you before, we'll use this tab to plot out what you expect your expenses will be over the course of the grant. But let's look down here at the lower left of the tab. And you're going to see that the PFR is calculating your working capital advance based on the first 2 months of your cash budget here. So it's really important that you carefully craft your cash budget. We do not have pre-award costs this cohort. So if your grant isn't executed until month 2 or month 3, whenever it is, you would start in that month and finish out and complete your cash budget all the way to month 12, ending in October. So we're going to use the go back button again, find month 1 and press go to PFR. Always the same exact here, making sure you enter your month, year, and date prepared. Make this a little bigger. Okay. So again, you're going to enter your current expenses for the month of November. And again, you're going to see that the total expenditures listed here on line 38 matches your disbursal amount listed on line 40, just like it did with standard reimbursement. But I want to caution you that your grant specialist may make adjustments to that disbursal each month to ensure that the nest egg of operating funds is only 2 months worth of projected expenses. So if it seems that you have more than that on cash or on hand, the disbursals will be adjusted to get you back to that 2-month amount. And then when we get to the last 3 months of your grant specialist will be working with you to spend down the nest egg and get you to 0. So as you can see, a well-planned cash budget and strong communication with your grant specialist are keys to making working capital advance work for your grant. Are there any questions on this one?
No questions.
All right, well, let's move on. Okay, so let's look at what we do when we receive your PFR, excuse me. So these are the principal things that we look for. We'll look to see that there are 2 signatures, and we'll check to see if the expenditures listed are in the correct budgeted categories. So for example, if you were listing a supply line item, which you have a budget for, but you accidentally listed that on the equipment line item instead, which you don't have a budget for, that's something that would be flagged. We'll also check to see if your reported expenditures are higher or lower than expected, and we often use cash budget for that. And we'll also see what the cash on hand balance is. So after you submit your PFR, your grant specialist may call or email you with questions or revisions. Once the grant specialist is satisfied with the report, they will approve it and send it to a supervisor for approval. That supervisor may have questions too, but when they're satisfied with it, they will approve the PFR and send it to our fiscal department to initiate the disbursals. Note that when the PFRs have been received by the R3 PFR team, you will receive an automatic email from our PFR progress tracking system to notify of the progress of your PFR. And that's all the way from reception to voucher. So this email is typically sent to the preparer of the PFR. So please make sure that they checked their inbox or spam folder. The tracker only allows us to send this notification to 1 email address. So if you would like to change that contact person, please work with your PFR specialist when you submit your first month. So after our fiscal department lets the grant specialist know that your disbursal is on its way, the grant specialist will lock the PFR and upload the Excel book to the shared drive for you to use for the next month to repeat the process. So Remember, we have a column on each PFR where you will report any adjustments to expense you reported in prior months. Since we have this column, we want to make sure that you don't make corrections to those prior months PFR. So we will lock the PFR and lock down all expenses you reported to date before we send you the PFR back. Since we are reviewing hundreds of PFRs each month, we have a standard way of naming the PFRs, and that is going to be a PFR, the grant number, and month and year. Starting with PFR will enable us both to group all of your files together, so please make sure you label it this way. All right, now we'll look at the dispersal process. While ICESA approves and initiates your dispersal, the payment is actually made by Illinois Office of Comptroller. Setting up direct deposit will speed up the receipt of those funds. In our training follow-up email, we'll include the link to the Comptroller's website that you see here. A few other things to know about direct deposit. Online sign up for direct deposit is not available, so you must call the Comptroller's office at 217-557-0930 to initiate the process. And after signing up is complete, your first dispersal will be a paper check. If you've already set up direct deposit from another agency or a prior grant, you do not need to sign up again. But if you've never received payment from the comptroller before, well, then your grant monitor will request a W-9 form so we can get you set up. But please note that this does not set you up for direct deposit, so you still need to do that on your own. And we'll include the link in the follow-up email later today. So our next trainings will be on timekeeping, which will be on Wednesday, October 16th. And following that on Thursday, October 17th, will be on the periodic performance reporting, and that is the PPR. And as always, we do appreciate your feedback. So we will be providing a link to a survey so we can learn how to continue to make these trainings better for you. And that is the end. I'm sure we got some questions there. Aisha?
We only have one question, Sarah,
Okay,
and that's, can you repeat the naming convention for the PFR file or put it in the chat?
of course. Let me go back to that slide for you. So it's pretty simple, just PFR, and then your agreement number or grant number, and then the month that you're reporting for and the year. So that way it's just so much easier for both you and the grant monitor to kind of keep track of which ones you're reporting to us. Phone number? Yes. Right here.
Okay, looks like that's all of the questions, Sarah.
Okay. Well, we will have the slide out to you either today or early tomorrow morning. Again, thank you all so much for attending, and we hope that this was a helpful training.